So the fan was more or less in the middle of the doors. The floor fan I put in between the two legs of the standing fan, so it would have been slightly forward, so it would have been on the carpet in the bedroom. I was at the amplifier when I heard the noise in the bathroom, my lady. The question Mr. Nel asked me, my lady, was noises. I heard one noise from the amplifier, and what he put to me is voices. No, I didn't hear any voices. I heard one noise. What I heard was, if I'm mistaken, then I'm mistaken. What I heard Mr. Nel put to me earlier was if somebody had seen me on the balcony. When I got the fans in, I was holding the handle of the door. The balcony, the tripod fan's leg was on the balcony. I first brought the floor fan in, and then I held the door and I brought the tripod fan in from the door.
We now cross live to our reporter Patricia Visagie, who is at the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria today. Patricia, very good afternoon to you. Day 19 of the Oscar Pistorius trial in court. Please take us through today's proceedings.
Well, certainly another interesting and a dramatic day here at the North Gauteng High Court. Of course, as we continue with the Oscar Pistorius murder trial right here. And of course, today we saw, tables turning for Mr. Pistorius as his defense advocate, Barry Rue, had to conclude his soft approach of course, leading his testimony in evidence, giving way for the state to start their cross-examination. And we saw the state prosecutor, Gerrie Nel, starting from the beginning, taking on a very aggressive approach as he took on the Paralympian on the stand. Of course, as you had mentioned earlier, things got even more interesting when Advocate Gerrie Nel had asked about the video called Zombie Stoppers that, of course, defense advocate Barry Rue had objected against, but eventually it was allowed, it was screened, and we continued throughout the trial, and we saw Advocate Gerrie Nel going down on Pistorius on the stand, trying very hard to get the truth out of him, tearing his testimony apart. But the most interesting part, although he did break down again on the stand today, unable to again control his emotions, it was not as severe as yesterday. It seemed like the Paralympian tried very hard to compose himself and, of course, answer the questions posed to him by the state. But to take us through today's proceedings, I'm joined now by a crime analyst, and that is Laurie James, and she'll be telling us more as to what she interpreted from the case today. Well, Laurie, a whole lot of interesting things came out today in the trial. But as you mentioned earlier, perhaps the balcony part, can you just take us through that?
That was very interesting testimony for me. What actually happened is on page 64 of Pistorius' bail hearing statement, he describes going out onto the balcony to fetch in a fan. And what came out in his testimony today is that he actually did not step out onto the balcony at all. In fact, he never left the room, which is quite bizarre twist of events actually, because if he was never on the balcony and he never left the room, then how would it be possible for him in his ever vigilant state to miss Reeva Steenkamp getting out of bed and going to the bathroom?
We also saw Advocate Gerrie Nel repeatedly cautioning the Paralympian against arguing with him. Why was that?
Well, Gerrie Nel was posing fairly simple, straightforward questions to Pistorius, which Pistorius was avoiding and changing his answers into almost rehearsed type answers, putting certain information on the record which was not pertinent in any way whatsoever to the question that Gerrie Nel had actually asked him to start with. So it appears that the testimony is almost, for lack of a better word, coached.
Now, that you said earlier that it seems like there's a whole lot of contradictions in Oscar Pistorius' testimony. Would you just highlight some of those contradictions?
Yeah, well, as I said, the first thing and most striking thing was this testimony about being on the balcony. He then went into having the fans plugged in, and Gerrie Nel was at pains to show him that it was actually impossible that the fans were plugged in where he had said they were, because there was in actual fact no spot in the adapter to plug in this fan. And it was strange because he was argumentative and he wouldn't concede it, even though it was plain to see there was no space for this fan. He then went on. Gerrie Nel asked him which evidence he was going to and which experts he was going to lead in order to prove that the state had so-called tampered with the scene. And Oscar again engaged Nel in quite an argument, avoiding the question once again. So this seems to be a pattern, and if this continues, we're in for a very long cross-examination.
Now, just another interesting part that came out with, of course, that video that was shown in court today. What would you say is the state trying to prove by airing that video live in court today?
Look, the video actually has nothing to do with any of the charges, but I think they've opened the door to character evidence, and what they are trying to portray there was simply young, reckless type behavior by four men enjoying the sensation and you know, the feeling of firing a gun and annihilating something or killing it and referring it to it as a zombie stopper. You know, I think it's more going to character evidence and trying to show a certain mindset.
Well, another shocking element in today's proceedings was the shot, or rather the picture of Riva Steenkamp's autopsy, perhaps her head, being shown in court today. And we saw a whole lot of people not taking light to that, even social media a buzz when that photograph of her being shown in court by advocate Gerrie Nel. Now, was that a little bit insensitive, or do you think it's normal to show such a gruesome pictures in court?
Look, unfortunately, murder is a gruesome game, and I believe through other sources that Mrs. Steenkamp was briefed in advance to expect the photographs. And, the Pistorius family was obviously very upset. But unfortunately, we are dealing with a murder, and it is gruesome. And if the public doesn't want to watch this kind of testimony, well, then they need to consider actually sitting in front of the TV and watching it, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with a gruesome, ugly crime.
Well, what would you say are some of the other experts advocate Gerrie Nel will be putting emphasis on when we return tomorrow, when he continues his cross-examination of Oscar Pistorius?
Look, I think another very interesting thing that came up today was this Oscar's testimony of it being an accidental discharge. So obviously then Gerrie Nel is going to look very carefully at the ballistics expert, because from what I understood, it's never been the defense's case that this was an accidental discharge. It was an intentional discharge aimed at stopping an intruder. So it was putative self-defense. An accidental discharge, in my view, was what happened in Tasha's restaurant, where the gun went off by accident, perhaps because of a bit of negligence, but generally by accident. So I think that the ballistics testimony is going to be looked at very hard, with this coming to the fore.
Well, some say we can expect Gerrie Nel to intensify his aggressive approach. What do you say?
If I was Gerrie Nel, I would. I definitely do not see him backing off at all. In fact, it's his job to get at the truth, and I think he's going to go very hard to get it.
That was the crime expert, or crime analyst, Laurie James, taking us through day 18th of the Oscar Pistorius murder trial right here at the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. And of course, tomorrow when we return on day 19, we expect him to take the stand again, as the state will continue its cross-examination of the Paralympian from right here at the North Gauteng High Court. And we expect advocate Gerrie Nel to, of course, intensify his aggressive approach tomorrow when we return right here at the North Gauteng High Court. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much. That was SABC reporter Patricia Visagie with analyst Laurie James giving us an account of the day's proceedings in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. The court resumes tomorrow morning.